Welcome to CineMike. For this episode, I'm going to review Blade Runner 2049, the sequel to the 1982 neo-noir science fiction original film that was directed by Ridley Scott. It was a loose adaptation of Philip K. Dick's novel, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? The story's pretty simple. Blade Runners are police officers that are tasked with hunting down replicants, or bioengineered artificial humans, for those of you that aren't familiar. It's pretty basic. There isn't even that much in the way of character development until near the end when Harrison Ford's character Deckard realizes that he's basically working as a murderer for hire and he leaves that world behind. So, what makes this such a classic? Well, it's a visual masterpiece. The use of color and light in that movie was incredible and revolutionary. The style of the movie is like a futuristic detective story, so there's heavy use of shadows. Like how light projects the shadows from window blinds onto Ford's face, almost like prison bars. The dystopian Los Angeles landscape is a production design work of art, with its large video billboards, flying cars, and Gothic skyscrapers. The streets are diluted in mist and rain, setting a really unsettling atmosphere. To sum up all of this praise, the movie was just freaking cool. It really made an impression and was extremely influential in its genre. With all these reboots and sequels sprouting up from everywhere, revisiting this world is only a matter of time. These reboots can be hit or miss, and especially in this case with a movie that's held in such high regard, it was going to be a huge challenge to come up with a sequel that would live up to it. So hiring auteur director Denis Villeneuve definitely piqued my interest. He directed great films like Prisoners and Arrival. So did he deliver with this one? To put it simply, hell yes. All of the praise that I gave for the original film is totally transferable here. I could have been talking about this movie. The visuals in this are just jaw-dropping incredible. It's been a long time since I've been so wowed and in awe of special effects and production design. They took the foundation from the original and just totally blew the lid off in expanding this world. The story takes us into so many different corners, and we are guided through them with masterful cinematography. I was just totally blown away by the huge sweeping shots that move high above the ground and through massive labyrinths of buildings. It was just so vibrant and beautiful. The visual effects in this were the best that I've seen in a long time. I'm a huge advocate for the blending of CGI and practical effects, and here, I honestly can't even tell you where one begins and the other ends. I could tell that they were using every trick in the book, from old to new. Like, I'm pretty sure that they were using some good old-fashioned miniatures in there. But it was all blended so seamlessly that I felt totally lost in it. Unlike the original movie that's set mostly at night, this one shows a lot of the ugly beauty of this world in daylight. It's so rich and detailed. A love letter to the original by director Denis Villeneuve. You could really see his passion for Blade Runner in this. Now, I'm not trying to say that this was more impressive than the original, because given the advancements in technology today, I don't think that would be fair. What I am saying, though, is that this truly is an update of the original. It's the Blade Runner for today. That said, this also has a very old-school feel to it. Unlike most modern sci-fi action films that are designed for simple entertainment, Blade Runner 2049 has a story to tell. There's a lot going on in this story, so it's going to be hard to try to summarize it, but I'm going to do my best to keep this as spoiler-free as possible. The story takes place 30 years after the first film, which was set in 2019. And if you're interested to see what happened in the intervening years, then I highly recommend you check out the 3 shorts that were released. One details a massive blackout that erased the replicant registry, another one shows how Jared Leto's character Wallace took over replicant production, and a third that shows Dave Bautista's character revealing himself as a replicant while saving a little girl. All 3 of these shorts were really well done, so check them out. Skipping ahead to 2049, we follow Kay, a Blade Runner who stumbles onto a case that could challenge how the world defines life. It would have been pretty easy to turn a Blade Runner sequel into another generic action movie, but thankfully they respect the material more than that. Now, there is still some action in this that is impressive, like the final sequence had me in the edge of my seat, and there's a brutal fight between Gosling and Bautista, and Ford even manages to get a few punches in there. Like there's this photo of Ford accidentally punching Gosling for real to prove it. But this really isn't an action movie. The focus is on story first and foremost. Once again, as with the first film, this really plays into that detective genre by giving Kay a good mystery to work out. And actually, I think that the mystery in this is even better than its predecessor. There's just a lot more layers to it, and it asks bigger questions about the human condition. I feel that it gets a little deeper, and it just feels more emotional and dramatic. The narrative has several twists and turns that keeps you guessing until the end, There was this really predictable path that the story could have gone down, and I was glad that it usually chose the less conventional approach. This time, Harrison Ford takes a backseat to Ryan Gosling, who stars as K, and this really is his story. He carries the movie. We rarely leave his perspective, and he's our guide. Like Deckard before him, K is a Blade Runner who doesn't take pleasure in his work. He's good at it, and that's a burden. He feels trapped by circumstances. Gosling is really effective in playing that sadness of someone who wants to be more. I will say, though, that while Gosling is a great actor, and I really did enjoy him in this, I did think that there was some missed opportunities to play into certain elements of the character. What I'm referring to is connected to certain twists and developments about him that I won't spoil here, but overall, despite that, he was great. The only real connection that Kay has is to his holographic girlfriend Joy, played by the beautiful Ana de Armas. The use of futuristic technology in this movie is really creative, and she's a great example of that. Their love story may be artificial, but it also feels very sweet and genuine. It's tragic in that Kay can't physically be intimate with her. Sometimes her program malfunctions too, and it's just a painful reminder of the limitations between them. There's a scene in this where Joy uses a replicant prostitute as a surrogate for sex that was certainly interesting, but it did also feel very similar to a scene from the movie Her starring Joaquin Phoenix. I think that they handled this idea better here, though. The line between replicants and humans getting blurred is a threat that forces Harrison Ford's character from the original film, Rick Deckard, out of hiding. As a fan, it's been great to see Ford getting some good work again. I feel like for a while there he seemed a bit disinterested in his work. Here, though, he is back to form. It turns out he was in it less than I expected. However, once I saw where everything was going, I was overall pleased with it. He's such a subtle performer, like he underplays things, but it always feels very real and natural. That's why he's like that everyman. And there's a lot of history that he has to communicate about Deckard's life since the first film. When we last saw him, he was running away with Rachel, a replicant who he fell in love with. I really like and appreciate how the events of the first film are really important in this story. This is a true sequel in that it's cause and effect. Things that happened then are leading to things that are happening now. One of the elements that resonated the most from the first Blade Runner with audiences was the question, is Deckard a replicant? Behind the scenes, director Ridley Scott has made it clear that the answer for him was yes. However, the studio, the producers, and even Harrison Ford all disagreed, which forced Scott to tone that down. The end result was the best of both worlds because it was ambiguous. People still debate that to this day. This sequel made some hardcore fans nervous, and others excited as to whether or not that question would be answered. Well, you'll have to see the movie to find out. But I will say that I was personally satisfied with how they chose to deal with it. Uncovering a buried secret that can redefine life would possibly be beneficial for the replicants seeking their place in the world. However, it's also a threat to those that make money off of using them for slavery. Playing the puppet master is Jared Leto as Wallace, a blind replicant manufacturer that will kill to keep the truth buried. It turns out that Leto does have a pretty small role to play in this. I think that he was in maybe 2 or 3 scenes, but when he is on screen, then his creepily calm and centered performance steals the moments he's in. Wallace has the newer replicant models designed to be more obedient and controllable, but that doesn't seem to take. They appear pretty much as capable of rebelling as before. I was a little confused about that in certain moments, but I think that I understood the explanation by the end. I can't really get into it though without spoiling something. He is the main villain, but he's generally pulling the strings from behind the scenes. He instead sends his replicant enforcer Love, played by Sylvia Hoeks, to do his dirty work for him. Hoeks is a lesser-known actress, but this role may change that for her because she's really great in this. She has this really intense scene where she interrogates someone for information. The scene goes from being uncomfortable to downright scary very quickly, and Hoeks just owns it. Her ability to shed tears while being so intense and intimidating is really eerie. And she's also a really good physical threat. The cast then rounds out with other great actors like Robin Wright and Dave Bautista. There's also a few cameos from the original that pop in here. One of them, they use that CGI de-aging method, and it's scary how good it looks. There was no weak links in this cast, and everyone was top-notch. So as far as the editing and pacing goes, it's pretty unique in mainstream movies in this modern age where everything is fast-paced and quick-cutting. This movie really wants to take its time in establishing everything. Where an average film would cut out of a moment, this film holds on that moment. showing subtleties in performance and settings that are oftentimes lost in faster-paced films. This plays like a director's cut with a runtime of 163 minutes, and perhaps that brings up one of the very few complaints that I have about this. While I love that the movie was allowed time to breathe, it is still pretty long. There were certain moments and scenes that you'd usually find in like the deleted scenes section of a Blu-ray. Everything adds to the story, but there are certain moments that dragged a little bit and didn't feel totally necessary. But aside from some pacing, I was very impressed with the sequel. It's rare that a sequel or a reboot, especially of a classic film, can even come close to the original. Here, Villeneuve has managed to even surpass the original Blade Runner in certain areas. It's definitely bigger and more complicated. They don't usually make movies like this anymore, and so this is an exciting throwback. In the end, I think that the pros and cons of both films level them out to be about the same quality. That's a huge accomplishment, and a lot of praise is due for this visionary director. The last thing to mention about this movie is that it leaves itself open for more stories. There are elements that were left unresolved and unexplored. Even with how much bigger and more expanded this world became in this sequel, there is still clearly an even larger world that we have yet to see. The downside is that there are some narrative threads and characters that don't get resolved. So there is something unsatisfying about that. However, that's most likely deliberate if they're planning more sequels, which in this day and age feels like a very real possibility. So as long as they get an artist like Denis Villeneuve at the helm, then they've got my money. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a movie that I really geeked out over. It was really nostalgic for me. It tapped into all the things that I loved about the original, but expanded on it. I admit that the movie isn't perfect, but it's one of my personal favorites of the year. So in rating this movie on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the very best that this particular movie could be for me, I'm going to give Blade Runner 2049 an 8.5. And that was my review. So if you enjoyed this video, then please click like, and feel free to leave a comment below. Tell me if you agree or disagree. And I also welcome you to subscribe to my channel. You can also follow me on Twitter at CineMike Nerd. So anyways, until next time, this is Mike, signing off.